We're hosting New Year's at your mountain cabin. Already told everyone." My sister sent that message on a Sunday afternoon while I was standing in the cereal aisle of a Kroger in Nashville, comparing two brands of oat bran. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I figured it was a delivery notification. It was not a delivery notification. By the time I'd scrolled up to the beginning of the thread, my mother had already replied with 3 party hat emojis. My father sent a thumbs up. My aunt, who lives in South Carolina, and who I'd seen exactly twice in 4 years, wrote, "Can't wait! Booking flights now." Cousins I barely recognized were chiming in about sleeping arrangements. Someone asked about the hot tub. There is no hot tub. Another cousin asked if there was a grocery store nearby. Someone else said she was bringing her Labrador retriever without asking if that was all right. In 12 minutes, my family had collectively planned a 14-person New Year's gathering at a property that belonged entirely to me. Not one of them typed, "Did Freya say it's okay?" Not a single question mark directed at me. I'd been erased from the equation before the equation was even written. I put the oat bran back on the shelf. I walked to my car and sat in the parking lot with the engine off and the windows fogging slowly in the December cold. Then I drove home. My name is Freya Henning. I'm 33, and I've lived in Nashville for 6 years, working remotely as a senior UX designer for a software company based in Austin. It's the kind of job that looks unimpressive from the outside. A lot of sitting at a desk, a lot of staring at wireframes on 3 monitors, a lot of emails. But it pays well, and it suits my particular way of thinking. I like systems. I like process. I like understanding the logic behind how something works, and more importantly, why it breaks down when it does. I bought the cabin because I needed somewhere to go when the logic in my own life stopped making sense. It's up in the hills about 2 hours east of Nashville, not far from the edge of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. 2 bedrooms, a loft, dark wood siding, a front porch that faces a ridgeline that turns amber and bronze every October like something out of a painting. There's a wood-burning stove in the living room, a kitchen I slowly made useful over a series of weekend trips, and a creak you can hear from the back fence when the season's been wet. I bought it 3 years ago after leading a product redesign at my company that ended up winning several industry awards. The bonus was significant. I used most of it for the down payment, and I didn't tell my family what I'd paid. I'd learned by then not to volunteer financial information around people who'd come to view my finances as a shared resource. But I gave my sister a key. That was 2 years ago, at Thanksgiving, when she and her husband were driving through Gatlinburg on their anniversary trip. I thought it would be a kind gesture. Spend a night at the cabin instead of a chain hotel. Enjoy the hills. I handed her the key over dessert and said, "Just for the trip." She put it in her purse and said thanks, and I didn't think about it again. I should have asked for it back when she got home. I didn't. My sister is 29 and 4 years younger than me, which means she spent the first decade of my memory arriving into rooms and immediately becoming the center of them. She has always been loud in the best possible way when things are going well for her, and loud in a different way when they aren't. Growing up, my mother called it personality. My father called her a force. I was the quiet one, the steady one, the one they didn't worry about, which sounds like a compliment until you realize it means no one was paying attention. My mother used to say mature about me. That's the word adults use for children they've filed away. The pattern followed us into adulthood without any of us particularly examining it. It's easy to maintain a dynamic that no one looks at closely. Her husband Vince isn't a bad person. He's just someone who treats the world as a place that provides for him, without much thought for where the provisions come from. In the fall of 2022, he got laid off in a round of corporate cuts, and they were 2 months from losing one of their cars. My sister texted me from a parking lot, crying, asking if I could help cover the payments just until he found something new. I transferred $2,800 that same night without making her ask twice. The following spring, Vince needed dental work their insurance wouldn't fully cover, a root canal and a crown on one of his back teeth, and the bill was steep enough that my sister called me instead of their bank. I sent $600. There were smaller things too, spread over years. A grocery run when they were tight before payday, a utility bill she mentioned in passing, and I just said, "Send me the amount." Birthday dinners where I quietly covered the table. I never kept a list. I didn't want to be the kind of person who tallies what they've given to family. Love isn't accounting, I believe that. But I also believe that when you give freely and consistently, the people receiving it understand what it costs. I don't think that part was true. At Thanksgiving dinner, 8 weeks before the group chat message, I mentioned my New Year's plans in passing. I was going to drive up to the cabin on the 30th, spend a few quiet days alone to close out 1 year and ease into another, drive back on the 2nd. Jude, my boyfriend of nearly 2 years, was visiting his family in Oregon for the holiday, so it would be just me. I said as much at the table. My sister said it sounded lonely. I said it sounded like exactly what I wanted. The following Sunday, she sent the message. I've already described what happened in those first 12 minutes. What I haven't described is the specific feeling of reading my mother's response. "Freya, don't be difficult, it's a holiday," and feeling my chest go completely still. Not hurt, not angry, not yet. Just still. Like the moment before a thermostat clicks off and the whole house goes quiet. I typed into the group chat, "I already have plans to use the cabin that week. Please coordinate with me before making arrangements." My sister replied, "Oh, come on, we'll all be there, it'll be way more fun." My father sent a gif of someone doing a little dance. I put my phone down on the kitchen counter and left it there for an hour. Jude called that evening. He'd noticed I hadn't texted back about something from earlier, and he could tell from my voice when I answered that something was wrong. He has a particular quality of attention that I've come to depend on, the kind that doesn't rush to solutions. I told him everything. He listened all the way through, and when I'd finished, he said, "What are you going to do?" I didn't know yet, but something had shifted. I could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure. Nothing visible, just a difference in the atmosphere around you. "I don't think I'm going to fight them," I said. He was quiet for a second. "Okay. I think I'm going to let them show up." A longer pause, and then soft and certain, "Okay." I sat at my desk that night after we hung up and opened my laptop. 2 years before, when I'd first bought the cabin, I'd looked into listing it on Airbnb during the weeks I wasn't using it. I'd even had professional photos taken. A friend who does real estate photography drove up with me on a bright Saturday, and we spent the afternoon getting the angles right, the stove, the porch, the ridgeline through the windows. I'd decided against listing it at the time. Too much to manage, I thought. I opened the Airbnb host app and started a new listing. It took most of the evening. I uploaded the photos, wrote a description that was honest and specific. The creek, the trail access, the nearest town, the 2 parking spaces on the gravel drive, the cell service situation. I set the rate at something fair and set the availability window, December 30th through January 2nd. The booking request came in 41 hours later. A couple from Atlanta. Their profile said newlyweds, married in October, looking for somewhere quiet to celebrate their first New Year's together. I read their message twice. Then I clicked accept. I sent them the check-in instructions, told them I'd have the access code to them within the week, and closed the laptop. Because there was one more thing to do. I drove up to the cabin the following Tuesday. Cold, clear morning, the hills bare and gray, the sky that particular shade of winter white that makes everything look pressed flat. I'd already arranged for a locksmith from the nearest town to meet me there. He arrived at 10. Cheerful, efficient, no nonsense. He installed a smart lock in under 2 hours, keypad, app-controlled, with a temporary code system I could change remotely from my phone. When he finished and packed his tools, I stood on the porch and tested it 3 times. Then I changed the code once more, just to feel the solid click of the thing I'd done. On the drive back, I stopped at a roadside diner and ate a full breakfast at the counter, looking out at an empty parking lot. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Solid, like the floor under me was real and I was the one who had put it there. Back home, the group chat stayed active. My sister asked if the cabin had a good coffee maker. Someone wanted to know about extra blankets. My mother asked if the nearest grocery store was far. An uncle I'd met twice in my life asked about road conditions in winter. I read the messages. I didn't respond to any of them. Jude came over on Christmas Eve, and I showed him the doorbell camera app on my phone. I'd installed it mostly as a precaution after a neighbor mentioned there'd been some break-ins in the area, and then largely forgotten about it. I pulled up the live feed. The porch was empty. Pine needles were blowing across the steps. "So you're going to watch," he said, leaning over my shoulder. "I'm going to watch," I said. He picked up his glass and tapped it gently against mine. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear. I worked from home until noon, half distracted, clicking through design files without really seeing them. I propped my phone next to my laptop and pulled up the camera app. The driveway was empty. I ate lunch. I checked again at 2. Still nothing. At 3:47 in the afternoon, a minivan turned onto the gravel drive. My sister got out first. Puffer jacket, tote bag, already talking with her hands before she'd even closed the door behind her. Her husband came around from the driver's side. Behind them, a few seconds later, my parents' sedan. Then a third vehicle pulling in behind that, one of the cousins, I assumed. They unloaded in stages. Someone was carrying a case of sparkling wine. Someone had a duffel bag so large it looked impractical for 3 days. My mother was gesturing at the tree line like she was giving a tour of the property, which, I realized, she was because most of the people standing with her had never been there before. My sister jogged up the porch steps, keys already jingling in her hand. I leaned toward the screen. She found the cabin key on her ring, pushed it into the lock and turned. The lock didn't move. She frowned. She tried again, slower this time. Nothing. She pulled the key out, looked at it, put it back in. Her husband came up beside her and she handed it over and he tried, and the door held firm. Then 2 of the cousins went around to check the back door, and I watched them return shaking their heads. The noise on the porch got louder. I could see it in the body language even without sound. Hands going up. People looking at each other. My mother put her palm over her mouth. My father stood with his weight shifted back, the way he does when he doesn't want to get involved. Then the front door opened from inside. The man from Atlanta stood in the doorframe in socks and a flannel shirt, holding a mug, looking out at 14 strangers on the porch of the cabin he and his wife had rented for the holiday. My sister said something to him. He said something back. He held up his phone, showing her the Airbnb confirmation, I assumed, the one with my name on the listing, and then he closed the door to a gap, and they exchanged a few more words, and he closed it the rest of the way. My sister turned around and looked directly into the doorbell camera. She stared at it for a long moment, not anger yet, something quieter first, the leading edge of understanding. She picked up her phone. Mine buzzed. I let it ring. The group chat lit up. I could see the notifications stacking. I watched them from Nashville while they clustered on the cold porch, checking their phones, talking over each other. My mother sat down on the porch step with her arms around herself. Her husband was pacing. One cousin leaned against the hood of the minivan with her arms crossed. I waited 20 minutes, then I called my sister back. She answered before the first ring finished. Freya. Her voice had that particular controlled quality that meant it was barely controlled. "Hey," I said. "What is happening right now?" "I listed the cabin," I said. "It's been booked since December. A couple from Atlanta is there for the holiday." "You knew we were coming." "I knew you'd announced you were coming," I said. "That's different." I told everyone in the chat that I had plans for that week, and my mother told me not to be difficult. "Freya, there are 14 people standing outside in the cold." "I know, I can see the camera." A short silence. You watched us pull up." Her voice shifted slightly. "I did." She didn't say anything for a moment. Behind her, I could hear my mother asking what was going on, and her husband saying something low, and the sound of gravel crunching under someone's boots. "I don't understand why you didn't just call me," she said. "If you were upset, you could have called." "I tried to say something in the group chat," I said. "You told me to come along and it would be more fun." Mom told me not to be difficult. Dad sent a dancing gif. I don't know what a phone call would have changed. Silence. "We drove 4 hours," she said. "I know. I'm genuinely sorry that the drive was wasted. I am. But I'm not responsible for arrangements I didn't agree to and wasn't consulted about." I let that sit for a second. "There's something else I need to tell you. I'm going to stop the transfers, the car payments, and the other things I've been sending over the past couple of years. I've been glad to help when I could, but I need to stop." The silence this time was a different kind, heavier. "You're serious," she said, not a question. "I'm very serious. After everything," her voice thinned, "after everything we've been through as a family." "I've been part of this family too," I said. "I just always seemed to be the part no one remembered to ask." She didn't answer. I could hear my mother's voice in the background getting louder, asking to know what was being said. "The booking guests are inside through the second," I said. "I can text you some rental options in the area if you need somewhere to stay tonight." "Don't," she said, flat final, and then the line went quiet. I set my phone on the desk and sat in the silence of my apartment. I pulled up the camera feed one more time. The driveway was clearing. Cars backing out one after another, headlights sweeping briefly across the bare trees. My mother was the last one to get in the sedan. She paused before she closed the door and looked back at the porch. I don't know what she was looking at. Maybe just the place itself. Maybe trying to understand when things had changed. The gravel went still. I closed the app. I ordered dinner and watched a film I'd been meaning to see for months. At midnight, the city outside did what it does, briefly loud and then suddenly quiet. I fell asleep before 1. I drove up to the cabin the following week. The couple from Atlanta had left it immaculate, cleaner than some family visits I could remember. The dish towels were folded. The counters were wiped. On the kitchen table there was a handwritten card. "Thank you. Truly the most beautiful place. Hope to return." I read it standing in my coat and boots in the cold kitchen, and then I set it on the windowsill above the sink. I lit the stove and made coffee and sat in the chair by the window. The creek was running loud from the winter rain. The trees were gray and bare against a white sky, and the whole hillside had that quality of quiet that only exists when it genuinely hasn't been disturbed in a while. No notifications, no group chat, just the sound of the water and the tick of the stove as it began to warm the room. That was enough, more than enough. My sister texted in February. One line, "I think we should talk when you're ready." I read it several times. I wasn't ready, and the strange thing was that I didn't feel guilty about not being ready. The guilt I'd been bracing for. The automatic flinch, the instinct to smooth everything over before it even got rough. Never quite arrived the way it used to, or it arrived smaller and I was larger than it. I spoke to my mother once, in March. She said she wanted to understand what had happened. I told her. I had plans, I said so. No one listened, and I protected what was mine. She said family should come first. I thought about that for a moment. Then I said I was family too. I was just always the one who came last. She didn't have an answer for that, and we changed the subject, and the call ended politely. The cabin has 4 rental bookings on the calendar this year. The rest of the weeks are mine, and some of them are Jude's too. He drove up with me in April and stood on the back porch for a long time watching the creek without saying anything, which is one of the things about him I keep coming back to. The smart lock still runs off an app on my phone. I haven't handed out any physical keys. People ask sometimes whether I regret how things unfolded. I think about it honestly before I answer. What I regret is not the cabin, not the Airbnb listing, not the conversation, not stopping the transfers. What I regret is the years before all of that, the habit of giving more than I could afford to give, the way I confused being needed with being seen. Those are different things. I understand that now with a clarity I didn't have when I was in the middle of it. The distance my family and I keep now isn't comfortable, but it's honest, and honest turns out to be more livable than comfortable ever was. Some mornings I sit on the porch with coffee and watch the light come through the trees, and I think about that moment on the camera. My sister, turning to look into the lens, the key still in her hand, the door that wouldn't open. The look on her face before the understanding arrived. I don't feel triumph when I think about it. I just feel settled. You can give a lot to people you love. I know that. I've done it. But at some point you have to ask yourself what's being given back. Not in money, not in favors, just in the basic question of whether they see you as a person or as a resource they've never had to worry about running out. I asked that question late, but I asked it, and the answer changed everything that came after. If you've had to draw that same line between what you owe people and what you owe yourself, then you already know the line isn't cruel, it's just clear. And sometimes clear is the kindest thing you can give anyone, including yourself.